Hi, everyone. My name is Austin Kelmore, and I'm here to talk about learning from the past and inspiring the future, why you should chronicle your own movements. So for the talk today, I'm going to talk about learning from the past. I'm going to talk about game worker solidarity and the project I've been working on for the past 5 years. And then I'll be talking about chronicling your movements and what that looks like and why. The takeaways that I hope you get from this are some inspiration to organize and unionize, and that you have power in your story and that it's worth telling. So who am I? I've been working in the games industry for 19 years as a programmer and tech lead. These are some of the games that I've worked on in the past. And I've also worked across 2 different countries in the US and the UK. And I've founded 3 different organizations related to the games industry and collective power. So Game Worker Solidarity is the one that I'll be talking about later today. I've also co-founded the IWGB Game Workers, which is a union for video game workers and tabletop game workers in the UK. And more recently, in December, I co-founded No Games for Genocide. So from these 3, I really, really care about game workers and collective action and our power together. So learning from the past. I think it's really important because one of the things that I tried to do very early on when organizing and unionizing was, how do I learn how to do it? And where do I find motivation for the long haul? And it's not something that we can do just within a month. And so you have to have kind of the longevity to be able to do it for years. And that can come with dips of energy. So how do you motivate yourself? And one of the things that I did early on was I found instances in the past of other unionization efforts. So specifically the steel industry. In 1936, William Z. Foster wrote about organizing methods in the steel industry. And nearly 90 years later, oftentimes they're still very relevant to the degree that some of the New York Amazon workers used this essay as a discussion point to figure out how to organize their workplace. Some of the other things is oral histories from the workers themselves. So if you haven't heard of these, I highly recommend all of these. They talk directly to the workers who participated in many of these actions. Kickstarter Union Oral History is fantastic. Workers' Inquiry from Notes from Below is another wonderful one, talking directly to workers. Working Class History has a very broad overview of workers and more movements in just a general sense across the world. And then Heat the Ground Up is an oral history of the Starbucks Workers United, which is absolutely fantastic and really, really helps, even though they're not video game related. And then some books. So these are firsthand accounts of people who have organized. So Jane McLevy is a big name in union organizing. Marshall Gans, Daisy Pitkin. Daisy currently works on the Starbucks Workers United campaign. Karen Lewis and Ian Allison. These are all fantastic books. And one of the big takeaways I had from all of this knowledge is it's basically impossible to unionize an industry until it isn't, until you put in the work, until you try multiple different things and do the long organizing work to actually make it happen. So now let's talk about game worker solidarity. So specifically around game workers and actions that they've taken. So when the co-founder, his name's Jamie Woodcock, he's an academic, and he's written about the video games industry quite a bit, and myself, we asked some questions. How many game workers are taking collective action? Where are they located? What can we learn from each other, and how can we inspire each other? We didn't necessarily know the answer to these questions when we started this project. So we launched it in 2021, December of 2021. And at the time, we had found 89 actions that game workers have taken. It's worth noting that I'm sure we're missing quite a lot. So if you find any, please let us know about it. And then 5 years later, we are happy to announce Game Worker Solidarity 2.0. We have updated the entire site, and it's now bigger and better. We've collected a lot more actions over the past 5 years, so you can see that there's 258 actions. We have whole new ways to view all the data. One of the things I'm really, really excited about is we've added boss-led actions. So previously we just had worker actions, which you can kind of see here in the top section. And so we've collected quite a bit, but we were really missing, what were some of the actions that bosses took? And we have been lucky enough to be able to use the data that Raj Patel has collected on redundancies in the industry. So you can see that in one of the years, 14,000 workers were made redundant that year, which is quite significant and ties directly into some of the actions that workers have taken as well, right? So it's able to kind of tell more of a cohesive story. One of the other things that we've added is the ability to talk about campaigns as a whole. So previously we had individual actions that we were tracking, but it wasn't really clear sometimes, like what came before it or what came after it. For instance, oftentimes union campaigns will start with the workers taking action together, maybe with a petition, and then they eventually move to trying getting recognized as a union. So they might try and submit for recognition, and then they might have to take action in between to force the boss to actually recognize them. And so then they get recognized, and then they collectively bargain, and so on and so forth. And so previously we were only tracking individual actions, but that wasn't really telling a cohesive story. What I'm trying to point out is that the story is very, very important, especially one like the launch of Game Workers Unite, which inspired so many workers to take action. So we've added the ability to have timelines and set up individual campaigns. You can also add individual pages for organizing groups, like all of the unions that have taken action, so you can kind of tell the history of the unions. And me and my co-founder really invite the workers themselves to actually write these, and then we'll post them on the site. So we want this to be a living history of things that workers have done from their perspective as much as possible. And so that leads me perfectly on to chronicling your own movements and actions. So one of the reasons why I've thought about this quite a bit is this is a protest that my own union, the IWGB, took outside of Take-Two in London. And Take-Two owns Rockstar, for those who don't know. These people here were protesting the firing of 34 union organizers across the UK and Canada and trying to get them reinstated. And one of the things I want to kind of point out here is there are two very different stories of the same exact action that you could tell. So how do you think the people in this picture would tell the story of why they're there and what they're doing? They came to support the workers. They wanted to get them reinstated. They wanted them to have wages so that they could, live and survive, and not be fired for their union activity. And if you think, what might the executives inside the building tell as their story? One possible example is that they could tell a story of the aggressive protesters who scared everyone and almost set fire to the building. And that's probably not anywhere near true, but if you saw this picture and you heard their testimony, you could potentially take away that that was true. And that's not the case. And so I think it's very important that the workers tell their own story and chronicle their own movements and actions, both for the just accuracy of it, because we have a very lived perspective, but also for future generations that look back on this. And just as a total side note, my co-founder of Game Worker Solidarity is here in the bottom right, Jamie Woodcock, and he's looking towards the action. So a big question I have for all of you is, do you want these guys to tell your story? So these are the CEOs of Epic Games, Ubisoft, Electronic Arts, Sony Interactive Entertainment, Take-Two Interactive, Valve, Krafton, and Embracer. And do you think that they would accurately represent your story? Do you think that the fact that they're billionaires might influence how they view union activity or organizing activity from the workers? I think probably yes. So then with a little bit of a leading question, or do you want to tell your own story? Do you want to be able to explain why groups of workers have come together to try and improve their working conditions? Why they've tried to fight back against unfair dismissals, why they've tried to stop redundancies, why they've tried to get better pay and working conditions. And I think it behooves us to really take that time to actually tell our own story, so that it can, inspire others, so that other game workers can learn from it and, see what's even possible. And it's worth talking about that a little bit too. So here's a short list of actions that game workers have taken over the past 70 years. And these are some of the ones that we've collected in Game Worker Solidarity. So game workers have submitted petitions and formed unions. They've collectively bargained with companies. They've boycotted companies. They've filed legal claims and won. They've protested or demonstrated outside of the companies. They've gone on strike. They've picketed. And even some workers in 1955 went on a hunger strike at Nintendo when they were trying to move their factory to a different location. So, I think it's just astounding if you look at the past, what workers have actually done, just game workers, to try and improve their working conditions. And then you look at where they've done this too. Each colored country on this map is a place that workers have taken action. So China and Japan and South Korea, Australia, South Africa, Malta and France and Spain, Sweden, Finland, Ireland, United Kingdom, Germany, Brazil, United States and Canada, and even more. We are a worldwide movement, and sometimes when you're organizing, deep into the night, it can feel like you're this small group of people trying to improve your working conditions. But I think sometimes it really, really helps to look at just how many game workers are trying to organize and unionize together to improve their working conditions. And I think this conference as a whole is a testament to that, right? Like, there are so many of us from all across the world who are speaking at this conference about us trying to take action and improve our working conditions. So hopefully something that you can take away is you're a part of history and you can chronicle your own stories, or you can let those in power portray them for you. And you can probably guess which direction I think we should all take. So I want to leave you with my favorite action by game workers. I didn't actually list it on the list before. And this is something that I come back to time and time again. So in 1985, Atari made all the factory workers in Limerick, Ireland redundant. And in response, the workers went on strike and occupied the factory and all the remaining consoles they produced with their own labor. They demanded improved redundancy terms and won them. And so I think you can see this is one of the workers that took action. And in the bottom left picture, you can't really see it, but there's a person in the window and the two people on the ground are looking up at the person who's occupying, or one of the people who's occupying the factory. And this quote from one of the workers, unfortunately I don't know her name, is a perfect response as to why they took this action and were so public about it. They wanted to highlight the whole situation, the way that they've been treated, and in hope that even if they don't gain anything from it, that other workers will see the stand that they're taking. And other workers definitely did, even if it's like 40 years later. So I come back to this time and time again when I'm feeling low, and they inspire me to continue on with my own organizing activities. So you have the power to create change and inspire others. What are you going to do with it? Thank you for watching my talk. The QR code in the top left will take you to gameworkersolidarity.com, where you can check out the updated site. And you can find me on Blue Sky at austinkelmore.com and gameworkersolidarity.com. Thank you very much, all. Solidarity forever.